The evening sun was sinking behind the wide fields when Luke Marshall heard the sound. It wasn't the wind against the barn walls or the creak of old wood. It was softer, fragile, and desperate, a cry that didn't belong in the stillness of his land. He paused with the feed bucket in his hands, listening again. There it was, faint but sharp enough to cut through the hum of cicadas. Setting the bucket down, Luke stepped out into the open yard. His boots crunched over the dry dirt as his eyes scanned the fence line. At first he saw nothing but the tall grass swaying under the last light of day. Then, near the edge of the road, he noticed a figure moving slowly, stumbling more than walking. She was small, her frame almost swallowed by the tattered coat she wore. Her hair, dusty and tangled, clung to her face as she tried to keep herself upright. Luke's heart tightened when she looked up. Her eyes were wide, dark, and filled with a fear he recognized. "Hey," he called out, keeping his voice low so as not to startle her. But she flinched anyway, her shoulders curling inward as if bracing for another blow. She took 2 more steps before her knees buckled, and Luke hurried to catch her before she hit the ground. Up close, he could see the bruises, angry purple marks along her cheek, a split lip, and blood staining the corner of her shirt. When his hand brushed against her ribs, she cried out. "No more pain," she whispered, her breath ragged. "My ribs, they're already broken." The words lodged in his chest. Without another question, Luke scooped her into his arms and carried her toward the house. She weighed next to nothing, but every jolt in his stride made her wince. Inside, he laid her gently on the old couch, grabbing a blanket from the backrest. She tried to sit up, but he shook his head. "Stay still. You're hurt." Her gaze darted to the windows as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "You can't help me," she said quickly. "They'll come looking. They always do." "I don't care," Luke replied, kneeling beside her. "Who did this?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, the refusal clear in her eyes. Luke didn't push. He knew enough about the kind of fear that lived in silence. He tended to her as best he could with the supplies he had, a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and a steady hand. She barely spoke as he cleaned the dirt from her cuts, her gaze fixed on the floorboards. When he touched her side, she sucked in a breath, and he realized the injury there was worse than he'd thought. "You need a doctor," he said firmly. "No," she answered at once, her voice trembling. "No doctors. No law." That was when Luke understood. Whoever had hurt her wasn't just some stranger on the road, they were someone with reach, someone she believed could find her anywhere. "Then you'll stay here," he told her. "I've got enough space and enough quiet for you to rest." Her eyes searched his face, as though trying to measure the truth in his words. After a long moment, she gave the smallest nod. Days passed in slow rhythm. Luke tended to the ranch as usual, but his thoughts often drifted back to the woman in his home. She told him her name was Anna, but little else. She slept a lot, her body demanding rest it had long been denied. At night, though, Luke would hear her crying softly. Sometimes she'd murmur things in her sleep, apologies, pleas for someone to stop. He never woke her. He just sat in the kitchen with a lamp on low, waiting in case she needed him. The first real conversation came on the 4th evening. Luke was mending a piece of tack at the table when Anna stepped into the room, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her. "You fixed my coat," she said quietly, noticing it hanging by the door. Figured you'd need it when you're better. She hesitated, then sat across from him. Why are you helping me? Luke looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I know what it's like to be left alone when you need someone most. Anna's eyes softened, but she didn't ask what he meant. She seemed to understand that some truths were earned, not demanded. A week later, Luke went into town for supplies. The air in the general store was thick with talk, low, eager whispers that paused when he entered. He ignored them, collecting the flour, coffee, and medicine he needed. But as he paid, the storekeeper leaned closer. You be careful, Luke. There's folks asking questions about a girl who matches a certain description. Dangerous folks. Luke's jaw tightened. I haven't seen anyone. The storekeeper gave him a look that said he didn't believe a word, but he didn't press. Still, Luke knew the whispers would spread. Out here, secrets never stayed buried for long. When he returned home, Anna was in the yard, sitting in the sunlight with her eyes closed. She looked almost peaceful until she saw his expression. They're looking for you, he told her plainly. Her hands tightened around the blanket. I told you. They won't stop. Luke took a slow breath. Then we make sure they don't find you. The next few days were tense. Luke noticed strangers riding the edge of his property, lingering just long enough to send a message. Anna kept to the house, her eyes flicking to the windows at every sound. One night, as rain tapped against the roof, she finally told him the truth. I was married, she began, her voice thin. To a man who owned half the land south of here. Everyone respected him. Feared him. He could buy anything, or anyone. But he couldn't control me, and that made him furious. Luke stayed quiet, letting her speak. He broke my ribs once before. Said if I ever left, he'd finish the job. I tried to run last year. They dragged me back. She swallowed hard. This time, I made it farther. But he'll come. He always comes. Luke's fists curled, but he kept his tone steady. Not here. Not while I'm breathing. Her eyes filled, but she shook her head. You don't know him. The whole town's on his side. They'd turn you in for a smile from him. I don't care, Luke said again, his voice like stone. It wasn't long before the confrontation came. Late one afternoon, Luke spotted 3 riders approaching, men dressed well enough to show they weren't drifters. The one in front had cold, sharp eyes that fixed on Luke like a knife point. We're looking for a woman, the man said without greeting. Small, dark hair, answers to Anna. Luke stood in the yard, his hands resting easily at his sides. Haven't seen her. The man's smile was thin. She's my wife. She's hurt, confused. Needs to come home. Then maybe you should have treated her better, Luke said, the edge in his voice unmistakable. The man's smile faded. I could make trouble for you. You'd have to step foot on my land to do it, Luke replied, his gaze steady. And I don't take kindly to trespassers. After a long, tense silence, the man turned his horse. This isn't over, he said before riding away. Luke watched them until they were nothing but dust on the horizon. That night, Anna stood at the window, staring out into the dark. You shouldn't have done that, she murmured. I'd do it again, Luke answered from the doorway.